Nobody's perfect. The last remaining undefeated teams in the official Fantasy Ruckers League have been taken down in round 3, and the competition is only getting hotter. A full Fantasy Major League Rugby breakdown from this past week, a waiver wire update, and a preview of the upcoming matchups in round 4 up next. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 56 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. I'm Ryan Yee. With me, as always, Matt Yee, of course. And hey, look who's back. Devin Vandy
Back to back,
2 weeks in a row, baby.
2 weeks. Absolutely.
Back to back. Hey, back to back on the show is not the only thing you're going back in.
3 in a row now. Back to back to back.
There you go. It's been a tough little start to the Fantasy MLR season for Vandy, but we'll see. But hey, thank you for everyone tuning in to this episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Obviously, super exciting stuff coming out of round 3 of Major League Rugby. And of course, the same can be said about our Fantasy Ruckers League as well. For Fantasy MLR, it's been an absolute blast so far. Yeah, super exciting stuff. Like we mentioned, and I teased at the top of the show, nobody's perfect now. Everyone has a loss. No undefeated teams.
You're welcome.
It seems like the competition is getting tighter and tighter and tighter for most teams here. Vandy, you're struggling a little bit. We'll get into that all. But yeah, jam-packed episode in this one. Of course, we're going to break down everything that we saw in the fantasy performances of round 3. Obviously, give a nice little waiver wire update for our league members to see who they need to be looking out for, and talk maybe a little bit about strategy as we head about a month in to the MLR season so far. And of course, we'll then break down obviously what we're expecting to come here in round 4 of the Major League Rugby season. A lot of good matchups there that should have a lot of fantasy points. But guys, just overall thoughts over round 3. It keeps on going. How is the Fantasy Ruckers League season treating you guys so far?
Andy, go ahead, buddy.
Rough waters, to say the least.
Oh, no.
It's been tough.
All I hear is Evanescence play on the weekends now. That's it.
Oh, no.
Can you
But yeah, it's been a rough start there, Vandy. But hey, we're looking here to turn your ship around here, and that's why you're hopping on this show, because you're getting better as a fantasy MLR player. Hopefully, as we keep on.
Yeah. I wish I could back that up with something.
But hey, Matt, for you, it was a little bit of a different story in this week. Some pretty big numbers from you, man.
I was worried going into the point calculation, but I came out on top. I brought on all the gold that I could find in my closet. Put it on, represent just, how successful I'm doing this year and how it's just going to keep on going. I called it last week in our moment of silence, going for that championship. One loss doesn't mean a thing for me.
You did call it there, and it's been very interesting too, that where you're sitting in the standings.
Oh, it's not interesting at all. This is the plan.
You took all those poop emojis to heart.
Hey, I turned them to gold.
I mean, we are still very early in the season, so still lots of rugby to be played. But nonetheless, yeah, our league has a whole bunch of competition going in, a lot of similar record teams. And we're gonna break that down, obviously, in our Commissioner Yee's league update as well. So yeah, got a fun show here on episode number 56. We're gonna get right into it right here, right now. But before we do that, hey, we got to say it every single episode. If you aren't already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube as well. Throw us a like down there if you like what you're seeing. Give us a subscribe. Hit that subscribe button as well if you want to get notified when we release episodes every single week, talking all the latest in Fantasy MLR. It's been a super fun journey so far in season 2 of our journey of making Fantasy MLR a reality in the league. It's been super fun stuff. And hey, hey, we have a website too, thefantasyruckers.com, where our entire league is operating. It's absolutely been a game changer for how fantasy MLR has been operating moving forward. So if you want to check that out, and I think even for guys, even for the maybe fantasy centric MLR fan, even just the stats that we have on there now as we collect these stats over the course of time, you're really able to look at these players, something that may not be available to kind of the general public in terms of in avenues through just MLR sites and things like that. I think it is very interesting to see just overall stats as well, to break those down. So it's been super fun stuff there. And if all that isn't enough for you either, we do have a Discord community that's been absolutely blowing up too. Lots of people talking rugby, and they're all the latest in the MLR. Been having super fun stuff with the Fantasy Ruckers community. So you can find that link down below to join that community as well, and join this movement of making fantasy MLR a reality. So with that being said, let's move on here. And before we get into kind of the latest in the Fantasy Ruckers League and how all of our league members are doing, we do have some news and notes here to talk about. Maybe not the most crazy week when it comes to breaking news, but there are some interesting nuggets here. The first, I guess, sourced through one of our very own league members, Rugby Morning, making a comment in our Discord channel that Billy Meeks of the Chicago Hounds may be finally making his appearance for Chicago soon. It sounds like he is back in Chicago. The speculation was that he was dealing with visa issues, work visa issues. It sounds like that may be resolved. I'm not too sure how reliable this source is. Obviously, there's probably a little bit of bias there too, because
I mean, look, look, I think Rugby Morning's probably been refreshing Billy Meeks' Instagram, waiting for a story to come up of a flight or landing at Chicago O'Hare Airport or something like that. So who knows? Maybe he was just wishful thinking. He dreamt it, and he's trying to leak some fake news out there.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Billy Meeks, if he's able to return and kind of even get to near the form that he was in 2022, the former back of the year in Billy Meeks, and obviously when we were breaking down all the numbers in terms of the new stats that we're using in terms of fantasy-wise in this season, he's an electric player, especially in the world of fantasy. And if he can even reach close to that, he's going to be an absolute game changer. He might actually end up being a huge steal. I think, I believe Rugby Morning selected him as he fell, because we predicted that if he was ready to go at the start of the season, that he would be the number one pick in our draft. And obviously, because of that speculation heading into that, he kind of had that draft stock falling. I believe he got selected in the fourth round, I want to say, by Rugby Morning. So we'll see whether or not that comes
third round.
Yeah. Okay, third round coming to, I mean, it was on, I think it was the
swing pick,
the 3-4 swing pick. But nonetheless, still a flyer that Rugby Morning took on, and then we'll see whether or not that pays off here if Billy Meeks can eventually suit up there for the Chicago Hounds. And then shifting over to another kind of bigger re-signing here, Jesse Parity of the New England Free Jacks, returning after having a little bit of a stint overseas in the Bunnings Cup. Played for Taranaki, racked up 7 starts during that time. In 2022, he played in 8 matches, starting once for the Free Jacks and scoring 1 try. There was a little bit of hype around him last season. I know that he was a kind of a bigger pickup, thinking that he would be able to make a bigger impact there last season. Didn't really come to fruition, but we'll see. Now that he's back with the New England Free Jacks, maybe he's someone to look out for.
I mean, that back row room in that on that New England Free Jacks side is quite deep. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, Mitch Jacobson is hurt right now, so maybe he does have some spot starts here, but it seems like that back row room is going to be kind of a tough one to crack, especially if he didn't make it last year as well.
Absolutely. And then the last piece of news, again, kind of a downwards week when it comes to MLR news. But this one is something I want to throw in there because they are going to be in the 2024 season. That is the Miami Sharks interacting with their fan group and making sure that they are pleasing who their prospective fans are going to be, releasing a poll of what their jerseys should look like heading into the 2024 season. There was a white jersey, a black jersey, and I believe I forget what the other color was here, but nonetheless, it was interesting enough to see that, and they took a little poll there. I love that they're sticking with the Miami Vice colors. It was fitting to do that, and now that the LA Giltinis are gone, who kind of adopted those colors, I think it's just more fitting that the Miami Sharks have that. So just a little bit of developments there with what is going to be the newest team in the MLR. Did you like the jerseys that you saw?
I mean, you know, the pink is always...
I like the colors.
It was the pink.
Yeah.
The pink is always... The pink and the blue, it's always going to be a good match.
For sure.
I think I saw somebody comment there of like, one, they didn't like one of them because it was too LA Giltini-ish. Which is fair enough. I mean, you want to stay as far away from that Mr. Gilchrist guy as possible. So, you never.
You adopt the colors, you adopt the attitude, eh?
Exactly. You adopt the colors, you adopt the attitude, and you adopt the fraud.
I mean, I'm looking at him now. And I'm looking at it now. I really do like the white jerseys with that kind of subtle stripe there. It looks really, really nice.
Yeah.
The gradient, I'm not a big fan of the gradient.
I like the gradient. I'll be honest.
Black one
so
over the pink to blue one. But yeah, I mean, to each his own. But interesting
the only issue with the white one is how does it look on TV? You can hardly tell the white and the pink, like the little pink, subtle pink and blue in the background,
right?
On like a generated picture. How's that going to look on TV? How's that going to look in the sun? It might just look like a white jersey.
I mean, at this point, to be honest, if you're wearing a white jersey and you don't have white on white numbers, it's a win in my books.
That's
honestly.
true.
I mean, how hard it's been to kind of follow some players there on the New England Free Jacks who have the white on white numbers has been
I mean, look, commentators have a hard time enough staring at their 3x4-inch screen trying to figure out what player has the ball. Don't make it harder for them. Like, cut them some slack.
Exactly. All right. Well, that's the latest news and notes around the league. Billy Meeks news coming out. Rugby Morning, obviously happy to hear that. Jesse Parody resigning with the New England Free Jacks, and a little bit of Miami Sharks news for what will be some hopeful fans there in the 2024 season to see some nice looking kit. But I do, again, love the fact that they are returning with the Miami Vice colors. I love it. It's fitting. It's great. All right. Let's shift on over now to a little bit of a Commissioner Yee's league update. All right, hear ye, hear ye. Here is Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers League update. All the latest happenings that are happening in our league and talk about it being a tight race after 3 weeks of play. We're looking at our 10 total teams in our league. 7 of them all have the exact same record, are sitting at 2-1. Vandy, unfortunately, you're not in that group there, but hey, still lots of time to turn things around. Still looking for that first dub, but at least you're not the only one, Vandy. MLR All Access, their team, Gimme the Loots, is sitting pretty right there with you. And to be honest, you're actually ahead of them in the points for category, so you're actually not in officially last place. Exactly, you got to take the little victories.
Ego needs it right now. It's hurt.
Exactly. So right now, if we're looking at the standings, Rugby wrap up again, sitting up top pretty with 2 wins, 1 loss there, 277.1 fantasy points. He's been riding the high. Matt McCarthy running that team of the Rugby New York squad and the good performances that they've had over the past week. And Matt, you're right there in second place, 263.2 fantasy points for Ruck and Roll, 2-1 there. I know you got a lot of flack last week for racking up your first loss of the season, but hey, it didn't phase your confidence.
People are sleeping on this squad, Ryan. People are sleeping on the squad. Exactly. Especially that Rugby Morning guy. That guy keeps throwing me under the bus. He doesn't know that I'm way ahead of him in the standings. Let's see how many names until we get to his.
Fair enough. Well, Feral Hippies is next at 2-1. Rugby Morning, they're 2-1.
Only one
Eagles Overseas, again, also 2-1. Lads on Tour, the former MLR champion, sitting at 2-1. Dankest Anchors, 2-1. I will say, though, between those top 7 teams in our league, and again, you can check all of this out, the latest standings, the latest matchup results on the fantasyruckers.com with all the player stats and who's contributing to these total fantasy points, that it's about 50 points between the top team in Rugby wrap-up and the bottom team there with Dankest Anchors, who have a 2-1 record. That's a significant number of points. So
yeah, I got way more points than that guy.
Different teams winning in different ways in terms of squeaking away wins or making dominant wins. But let's get into those matchups of round 3 that led to those 2-1 records. Feral Hippies was taking on the Dankest Anchors, falling short 80.8 to 74.8. Eagles Overseas keeping MLR All Access in the basement, 72.8 fantasy points to 62.8. Rugby Morning having a pretty decent showing, the third highest. The second highest on the week, 82.8 fantasy points, beating MLR Stats' total of 62. A little bit of a learning curve here for James Dealey and MLR, still trying to get into the fantasy MLR groove, but nonetheless, he's definitely going
He's putting too much time into his graphics on Twitter and not enough time into his fantasy team.
There you go. And then the tough one, Lads on Tour, Vandy beating you 76.2 to 66.3. I do think that you made a funny comment in the Discord channel that at least you're being consistent at that 60-point mark.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? You're
consistently
being
bad.
the little victories again, like you said. And then Matt, the highest point total on the week,
Oh,
96.9
and I didn't even have a kicker, baby.
and against Rugby Wrap Up, 81.4. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. You were able to get away with that win without even having a fly half in there.
Vandy.
You had told me,
Vandy.
me the other day.
Yesterday, Vandy, okay, the games are all done on the weekend. Yesterday, I'm looking at my lineup and I tell Ryan, he's going through the stats. I'm like, holy cow, I started Jason Potros and I had him as my kicker and he didn't even play on the weekend. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to lose this week by like 3 points, all because I didn't decide to pick up a kicker and wasn't even thinking. But no, I killed it. I guess the only thing I could have done was break the century mark. But, I got next week.
Yeah, you always got next week. The positivity is absolutely crazy, man, with you right now.
That's right.
Completely contrasting what we were seeing last season, but I feel like at the beginning of the year, it might have been the same way as well.
I was.
But nonetheless, yeah, I think that brings up a very good point, guys. And this is something that all of our league members need to keep in mind, is that there are bye weeks going on, and you're going to have to navigate that, especially as the season moves on. Pay attention to what players aren't in those lineups, and even more so, prepare yourself ahead of time, especially during that waiver wire period, knowing what guys will have, because that's not a surprise. It wasn't a surprise for Matthew. Missed under the radar. You can see why he had the poop emoji last season, because he's doing crap like that. And you want to try to position yourself during that waiver wire period and during those ad pickup times to make sure that you have those spots filled for players that are on bye week and that aren't going to be making appearances for you for that week. So just in mind, we'll get to the round 4 stuff, but on bye this week is Rugby Atlanta and Vandy, your Utah Warriors. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek there for guys that you need to find replacements for.
Your fly half.
In round 4 there. And then I will add here as our final little league announcement here, we are now 3 weeks in to this Fantasy Ruckers League season. And the way that our positional eligibility rules work is that if a player does not start at a position for 3 weeks in a row, they lose that eligibility, or the other way around, they also gain the eligibility of a different position. So we do have a select few players that have been starting at different positions than what we had allotted for them at the start of the season. You want to make sure you're looking out for that on your rosters. The genius mind of Alistair Kirschpool, the one that has been behind our website, Oddball Gentleman, in our Discord channel, who's been so helpful in the technical support channel as well, just been an absolute hero for us for the Fantasy Ruckers League, has been able to implement a little bit of an eligibility system within the system. But again, on a side tracking it, we've been able to see here that Nate Oxberger, Calvin Whiting, Marcel Brackey, Monty Tonga Uiha, I get that name wrong every time, Mana Tonga Uiha. I thought that was pretty good. Nice. All right. Sam Gala and Thomas Milanos have all lost their original eligibilities and have gained different eligibilities. So in Nate Oxberger's case, losing that scrum half eligibility and gaining the back 3 eligibility. Sam Gala losing the back row eligibility, gaining the second row eligibility. So these are going to be having different factors, because again, Sam Gala at that second row position is going to be huge at a position that doesn't offer a lot of points. In Nate Oxberger's case, having a guy that was basically scoring tries on a weekly basis on the outside at the scrum half position was a huge advantage. Is it partly why that Matt is at a 2-1 record? It might be, but nonetheless, he has got the back through eligibility. So make sure all of our league members go check out your players' eligibilities. And again, heading into this waiver wire period, while you're also considering the bye weeks, also consider the players that may be on your squads that have lost certain eligibility and gain different ones, where you'll need to fill out different gaps now. Does that make all sense to you, Matt? Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense to me. Essentially all I heard was I can't start Oxberger at my scrum half position, but I was thinking in 3D chess, 4D chess, maybe even 5D chess, and I already got his backup ready to go.
All right. Well, and make sure you're not make sure you're not forgetting about those bye weeks.
Yeah.
Again, and I know it's very tricky, especially with fantasy MLR. Definitely more trickier than, let's say, fantasy football. And Vandy, you could probably attest to this about just how, on top of dealing with the bye weeks, you're dealing with kind of unpredictable lineups. I do feel like that that the MLR has been a little bit better this season, and with regards to getting these lineups at a reasonable time for fantasy managers to pivot when they need to pivot. But nonetheless, when match day does come, you we'll want to check that every single week. And hey, if that's not an excuse to be in our Discord channel where we are posting, we do have a channel in there where the starting lineups are posted every single time, and the community has been fantastic in helping each other out, surprisingly, and getting those lineups out in those channels. So you want to make sure that you're paying close attention to all that to make sure the players that you're starting are in the actual starting lineups, or at least dressing in their respective matches. Yep.
Ryan, what about that injury announcement?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to give a little bit of a recap to our league managers about injuries. As the season goes on, obviously there's going to be more and more of that. Some teams better than others with regards to being clear about injuries that are occurring on their team. I know the Arrows are one team that have been pretty decent with making that clear. The Free Jacks have been pretty decent making that clear. But basically, as we progress forward, make sure league managers sending me messages. It's hard for me to kind of keep track of all the injuries that are going on. So make sure you're sending me messages of when you have a guy that is injured and you're providing me with that legitimate proof. I know it's difficult sometimes. I know Steven sent me a message. He was on the fan page of the Dallas Jackals, I believe, and he sent me, hey, they said that this guy's injured. But like, I don't think I could go by
from
that.
the team, Steven.
Yeah, and then I know John sent me a message. Oh, but didn't you see, you know, in on the field that he was obviously injured? But I'm gonna need a little bit of more verified proof, whether that's a verified source on Twitter, in terms of a guy that is reliable and
from the team, or from America Rugby News,
exactly,
or Brian Ray.
Or Brian Ray. Those are three very, very reliable sources there. So just a little bit of a
not Matt McCarthy though. That guy's gonna be spewing stuff to get his rugby wrap-up team up there.
No kidding. All right. Well, that's just the last update that I want to do, but that is the league update, the latest that's going on. And again, it couldn't be any more closer in terms of the standings when it comes to 3 rounds into our fantasy MLR season, and I'm super excited to see how it progresses here as the weeks go on. All right, you guys ready to break down a little bit of round 3 fantasy performances and who really stuck out in this 3rd week of play in the MLR?
Yes, sir.
Let's get it.
All right, let's start breaking some of these down. Let's open up with the very first matchup of the weekend. Dallas Jackals taking on the Seattle Seawolves at home. An expected result. The Dallas Jackals losing 35-10. Seattle basically dominating the entire matchup. And I have a list of guys that are obviously the top performers from this game. And you would imagine that they're all basically Seattle Seawolves players. I guess before we get into the actual fantasy performances of this, overall thoughts about this matchup, kind of what you expected. The Seattle Seawolves are obviously the real deal here in the season now, sitting pretty at 3-0.
Man, that field was bonk.
Oh, did you know what lines there were?
Oh,
the Dallas Jackals field is tough.
I had no idea,
bro. When they started, there was a scrum when I thought it was lined up on the outside, like right on the line. I'm like, yo, they're not gonna do this. And then it goes and they go outside, but I was technically in. Oh man, I was thrown for a loop.
Yeah. The other thing is, man, did you know they had a red card for like majority of the game?
Yeah, they had like 2 minutes.
Did you have any idea that Dallas had I joined like 10-20 minutes in. I had no idea until I was looking at our Discord and looking on Twitter. Yeah. I had absolutely no. They gotta throw the people a bone. Put some sort of graphic, like any sort of graphic.
I thought that too. I thought that was weird. Like they didn't have any kind of sign that somebody had a red.
Well,
just put a little red
bit of a red tick on the
even just put like a red card up by like their side of the scoreboard. Like,
that's what they usually do.
That's what they usually do. Typically, like in more established leagues, that's typically what's.
Well, honestly, I've seen that. I've seen it for other games in the MLR. So like, you know, this was the one you could have done it, and it would have been very helpful. It would have been really helpful.
Yeah, it was
water breaks. Can't show us red cards.
It was fly half Martin Elias who got the red card about 2 minutes into the match. So yeah, if you weren't watching right away, you were definitely missing it. But yeah, I guess what we expected from the Seattle Seawolves from a dominant performance there. Now from shifting over to a fantasy perspective there, obviously the big togger here is another massive performance by Reichert Hadding. And Matthew can say what he wants to say about Reichert Hadding. 19.8 fantasy
I gotta
points,
give you some of that
70
trend,
minutes,
baby.
2 tries, 71 meters gain. Absolutely crazy.
You gotta have a trembolone sandwich, buddy.
Yeah, I need some
That's
trend,
the one
baby.
that he's serving up. Their cafeteria in the Seawolves locker room, they're just feeding that to him.
His water looks like Mountain Dew out here.
Oh my gosh, his water looks like Magic or Michael Jordan's
You're a
special
beast,
sauce.
You're a beast.
Yeah, but what thoughts on Reichert Hadding, Matt? He's going to be worth that second. What was it? The second overall pick in our fantasy MLR draft.
I think he's gonna be the best player this year if he keeps.
Look, MLR stats put out a graphic of the most points scored, and you look at the top list. I think it was of 10 guys, all backs, all 10, like most of them being fly halves, and then there's Reichert Hadding sitting there at 2 with like 28 points or something like that. It's just like, that is ridiculous.
And isn't it? It's funny because that is kind of a parallel of what we were seeing in those early fantasy stats in the preseason, right? Like it was just uncomparable. He was just above all the rest when it came to being a forward that was essentially putting up back numbers. So yeah, he's definitely meriting what has been, I guess, really top performers. He's the second highest point scorer in our league right now at 52.2 total fantasy points.
Who's he behind?
We'll get to who he's behind in just a little time here. But yeah, Reichert Hadding, absolute electric performance. I also want to give a big shout out to JP Smith.
Continues
another 18-point performance. 3 try assists on this past weekend.
Unbelievable.
1 try, 62 meters gained. To have that type of production at the scrum half position, he's proving to be one of the best scrum halves from a fantasy perspective heading into this year. Duncan Matthews too, Matt. You're obviously the benefactor of Duncan Matthews, who you have him on his roster. Had a little bit of an off week in round 2, but bounces right back with 19 and a half fantasy points, 153 meters gained, and that wasn't even on his try. You know what I mean? You expect like the big explosive tries for him to get these. His try was not that far, but he just is able to rack up a whole bunch of meters throughout the course of the match.
The way that he's able to kind of slither through tackles and just make one step and make an extra, 5-10 meters on one run is just ridiculous. I mean, that's 2 out of the 3 weeks so far that he's racked up 150 plus meters gained.
And another guy that's been kind of going under the radar, Dan Creel. He has put up double-digit points every single week so far this season. This past round 3 being the best that he's ever done so far. 17.8 fantasy points, 114 meters gained, a try assist, 13 tackles. Didn't even have a try in there, which is rare to see when you're putting up above 15 points there. So Dan Creel at that center position. And again, I want to preface all this by saying that they were facing the Dallas Jackals, so you're going to see these expanded and inflated points, but nonetheless, still impressive performances by there. And then just 2 names, and Matt, I'll let you kind of touch on these guys a little bit because they're a little bit of a not as high performers, but there are some guys here that you did touch on. One is being Nakai Penny. You talked about him being a big pickup heading into this week. Had a kind of off weeks, didn't start in rounds 1 and 2, but gets the start in round 3, plays the full 81 minutes, adds the try there, 45 meters gained. But the big thing here is 18 total tackles, add a steal in there as well, racking up 17.4 total fantasy points.
I mean, look at the guy. The guy is an absolute mutant of a man. The biceps are huge. I've seen him in person. They're pretty big. But no, he I think he's made a name for himself for that starting roster. Even after they're not playing the Dallas Jackals. So we'll see what it's like moving forward, whether Ben Landry sits in there or whether he stays in that starting lineup. It'll be interesting to see, but I think he's shown what he can do on the field. And if he's in that starting lineup, you might be able to expect another big day from him.
And remember, Ronan Foley's dealing with injury, I believe, still. Yep. So that's also kind of contributing to that as well. And then a guy that I just want to quickly mention as well, Charles Elton, 24 tackles. Beast. On the match there, 81 total minutes again, 37 meters gained, only 11.9 fantasy points. But when you're putting up 24 tackles, we talked about consistency and the stats that are going to lead to that. And when you're putting up that number of tackles, that's definitely going to lead to that. Dallas wise, really not many guys to mention. Again, I think the only guy is Adrian Boyson there that kind of had a little bit of I guess an impact from a Dallas side of things, but 7.3 fantasy points, 70 meters gained. Again, not really anything to be said for this Dallas Jackals side. The one thing I want to touch on, though, before we move on to the next matchup leading into Saturday, was AJ Alatimu getting the first start of the season there, but really didn't do much from a fantasy perspective. If I'm just going to pull up his numbers here and what he did, only 5.2 fantasy points. You expect the boot from him. Only 1 conversion kick made, only 25 meters gained, no try assist there, not really distributing what you would see from there. Definitely not the numbers that you saw last year. Cause a concern here, Matt, now that you've seen him start and not put up the points he has. Where do they go here moving forward? Obviously, Jordan Chait has been the big topic of discussion moving forward, but kind of a interesting situation there for the fly half situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, Jordan Chait's weapon was his leg, and I mean, the guy was an absolute he was a sharpshooter with off the tee. It was unfortunate to see Alatimu not really be able to follow that up, especially when they're playing Dallas and when they're scoring that many tries. I thought Alatimu ended up playing a bit more of a kicking game, more so than Jordan Shea, which probably led to the less amount of points, less chance for try assists, less meters gained. So it kind of is what it is. I expect to see Shea taking that starting role moving forward, but that puts AJ Alatimu owners in a tough spot there.
Yeah, and that is MLR All Access, who owns AJ Alatimu. He picked him, I believe, with the 3rd overall pick, I want to say, which might become the biggest bust of the year if this kind of fantasy performance moves forward here. And Jordan Shade on the opposite end might be the steal of the year if he's back in that starting role and putting up the numbers that he had.
Can I just, before we move on to next game, just going to say, I know Pedro Imhoff got the 9 for Dallas, got hurt pretty early, and Danny Christensen came in. If Danny Christensen starts next game, or next week in Dallas, expect those guys. I forget who they're playing. I think who's playing Dallas?
Dallas will be the
San Diego Legion.
Yep.
Expect the San Diego Legion back row and guys to rack up on tackles. Danny Christensen tees the guys up because his delivery is way too slow. He just allows his guys to get teed up. So expect the same type of tackles from the San Diego Legion that you saw it in Nakai Penny and Charles Elton.
That's a good nugget there. All right. Enough time spent on, that's way too much time spent on a Dallas Jackals matchup. But when you're talking about what is one of the best teams in the league, it's hard not to talk about all the Seattle Seahawks guys that had performed there. All right. Moving over to Saturday's matchup, Rugby Atlanta taking on the NOLA Gold at home, getting the victory 29-16. And I guess the storyline here is we got to hammer it home. Matt's prediction of the NOLA Gold.
NOLA Gold is actually worse than Dallas Jackals. They have no bonus point.
Yeah. No, they are struggling right now, and there's a whole bunch of guys that are on this really disappointing list. Yeah, maybe your luck moves from your kind of your prediction to your fantasy performances here, Matt. But yeah, that NOLA Gold one, winning the MLR championship in 2023, may be one of the biggest flop of a take.
Hey, look. I'm gonna stick with it, Vandy. That means they're 0-3, you're 0-3. They can turn it around. You can turn it around too, man.
I appreciate the belief.
Yeah, of course.
All right. But overall thoughts on this matchup. It looks like Rugby Atlanta is slowly starting to turn things around. Again, they obviously had the win in the first match against the Toronto Arrows. I believe, I forget who they lost to in the second week. I'm just pulling it up here.
They lost to the good old Seawolves.
The good old Seawolves, that is correct. So a tough matchup there, and then obviously gets back in the win column here against the NOLA Gold.
Yeah.
Fantasy performers here from the NOLA side. Honestly, with this match, not really that many fantasy performers, despite it being a 29-point scoring effort by Rugby Atlanta. Really, there wasn't much from a fantasy perspective.
I'm gonna highlight Jordan Jackson Hope. This guy he looks like the main ball carrier for this NOLA Gold team.
Which got hurt as a JP Duplessis owner.
Yeah, it hurts, but the thing is that they're both being productive. I don't mind as long as they're both being productive. That's all right to me. But Jordan Jackson Hope, once I saw that he was starting at 12 this year, I kind of expected him to be getting some of that JP Duplessis carries that he saw last year. I just NOLA Gold to me does not look like a team that you don't pick up any guys from. Just because they're able to generate offense, it's just once they get there, they're not doing much with it. They're losing the ball in the tackle. They're turning the ball over. It's just a mess. It's an absolute mess once they get down into the red zone, and when they get opportunities, they're just never seizing them. But there is going to be guys on that team that's still going to be picking up points for you, though.
Yeah, Jordan Jackson Hope, 16.8 fantasy points in round 3, 1 try, 75 meters gained, 6 tackles, and a steal in there as well. So definitely not a bad performance there. Another guy that I will mention, and since we're on the NOLA Gold side of things, there are a couple other guys that you want to mention, kind of what you're alluding to, Matt, that there is points to be had. Tom Florence, again, continues to kind of be an impact guy from that back row position for NOLA. If he hadn't had added that yellow card, he would have had another double-digit performance for the NOLA Gold. 96 meters gained, not as many tackles tackles even, and he had 1 steal in there as well. So he's a guy that has obviously coming off that huge performance last week. Matt, you were the guy that faced Tom Florence in round 2.
Yeah.
But he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And then a guy that we'll probably be talking about here in the waiver wire pickup too is Jordan Trainer. 110 meters gained this past week, 3 tackles there, full 82, putting up the 12.4 of performance. Obviously, it's all tempered because Nola is just not putting up points and not scoring tries that often, so these points are a little bit lower. But like Matt said, there are points to be had. If we flip to the other side, again, not many crazy fantasy performances, but for me, it was obviously Jason Dam. Jason Dam was the biggest fantasy performer for Rugby Atlanta, throwing up another double-digit performance, 17.9 fantasy points, and a big one there is not only did he add the try, 23 total tackles, and we can't hammer it home enough. When you're able to rack that number of tackles up, you're going to be a consistent fantasy point scorer, and Jason Dam has proven to be that through 3 weeks of play, racking up double-digit points each and every time. I'll also throw in Johan Mumsen in there as well. Another double-digit fantasy performance. But surprisingly enough, what you picked from Johan Mumsen is a guy that's really going to attack the meters and get those ball carry meters. He only had 18 in this match, but he had also 16 tackles, and he added a try. And that's back-to-back weeks now with try scoring. Matt, you're the owner of Johan Mumsen.
Yes,
you're liking what you're seeing from him.
I love what I see from the old red, fiery little Mumsen. That guy is electric. I love watching him just work on that goal line.
Absolutely. Okay, and a couple names I want to talk about before we shift on to the next matchup on Sunday. Some kind of downward performers here. I would be concerned if I'm the Rodney Iona owner. Okay, this is a guy that you picked up having.
He played better though.
Goal team. He did play better. He racked up double-digit fantasy points for the first time this season. 35 meters gained, 1 try. He had 7 tackles in there as well, so an okay performance. But again, he added obviously for the first time significantly 3 penalty kicks there, so that was a good piece there, and a conversion kick, so really contributing to that. But again, you were probably expecting more from Rodney Iona, especially if you were on this Nola Gold train like Matthew moving forward there. I will mention too, Ruida Biddle. He had a pretty hot performance after the first 2 weeks. Kind of stepping back here, only 4.4 fantasy points, 35 meters gained, so just something to keep an eye out for. Anything else that you saw from this Rugby Atlanta Nola Gold matchup before moving on?
Hey, Vandy, keep riding that Luke Campbell train, man. Keep riding.
He looked a lot better, man. He looked a lot better.
Their offense looked a lot better with him starting. He's going to be their starter for the rest of the year, Vandy. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, and it was Damian Stevens didn't even suit up in this one, right? So that is also something to note as well. And he played almost the entirety of the matchup as well. 79 minutes played there. And if I will just see here who subbed in.
Villani.
It was Villani.
The rookie.
Sebastian Villani. So that is something to be said, that they are suiting up Villani over Damian Stevens, who Damian obviously starting the past 2 weeks over Luke Campbell. So yeah, Matt, I think I'm on the boat with you there that Luke Campbell should be moving forward here as their starter. All right, let's shift on over now to the first matchups of Sunday. The Chicago Hounds taking on the Utah Warriors in their first home opener of their franchise history. And
didn't go so well, did it?
The Utah Warriors spoiling the party in what was a defensive, ugly matchup. But nonetheless, 14-10, their victory for the Utah Warriors.
Although, how nice does that stadium look?
Oh, that's
dude. Yeah.
And the turnout there was massive, like 4,000 people. They said, I think the announcer said.
Yeah, 4,500.
Yeah, 4,500. Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely good to see. Yeah, definitely a good look in rugby field.
All to watch them go up 10-0 and then lose.
Yeah. There you go. So, and it is concerning, and we'll get into it, because I think we talked about how excited I should say we were for the Chicago Hounds team, at least on paper, and the complete opposite is happening here on paper. So obviously, I think it is pretty crazy to see that some of the names that we thought would be just absolutely electric for this team are just not performing, and you can probably attribute that to a lack of chemistry to begin the season. They're still working out the finer tune things up, but they're definitely not making the storm that we thought they were going to make to open up the 2023 campaign.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the centers were the big centerpiece of this team. And, we're seeing even this week in a low-scoring game, Bryce Campbell, Mark O'Keefe continuing to put up double-digit points, continuing to be fantasy relevant, continuing to be guys that you can probably rely on as fantasy managers. Even though, Chicago's only putting up 10 points in a defensive battle. So those guys are definitely stepping up to the plate. It's more the other guys that, maybe we expected a little bit more from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, Matt. Mark O'Keefe racking up 12.6 fantasy points, another double-digit performance. Again, hitting triple digits with the meters gained. And that's exactly what we're seeing from these center positions. Bryce Campbell, 76 meters gained, 13 tackles there, another double-digit point performance for him. So I think out of the entirety of the Chicago Hounds team, at least from a fantasy lens, you can count on these centers being somewhat consistent performers for you moving forward.
And maybe let's not forget about Caleb Strum or Strum or Strum, whatever how you say it. He's showing up. I think he's a Chicago native, and he ended up scoring the first try for Chicago in Chicago at SeatGeek Stadium. So he's putting up numbers unexpectedly that we didn't really see at the start of the season.
And I will say too, because at the start of the season, I had a back three for Chicago in my top 5, and that was JP Eloff. But essentially, Caleb Strum is becoming what I thought JP Eloff was going to be. And he had an 8.9 fantasy point performance in the first round, 62 minutes, 72 meters gained. But in this one, attacking on that try, playing the full 80 minutes, 93 meters gained, a total of 18 fantasy points. Caleb Strum, the top performer for the Chicago Hounds. I'll also throw in Julian Dominguez as well, who looked pretty good in his first appearance with the Chicago Hounds. 102 meters gained, didn't even hit that 70-minute mark yet. And he was still able to tally up 12.3 fantasy points. It's pretty impressive to rack up 7 tackles too as a back 3 player. I feel like that's pretty good stat line. Then moving over to Utah again, this was a very defensive battle, so not many fantasy points. But I got to talk about Joe Mano, because this is a guy that has
Randy,
been performing.
You like him, don't you?
He's been performing on a week in and week out basis. 8.2 fantasy points in round 1, 19.9 in round 2, and then now 15.1 in round 3. He seems to be cashing in, and he has scored a try in every single match that he's played so far in 2023.
What a man.
Oh my. Come on, man.
That was good. No, I'll take that. That's good.
We get it. You have a kid. You're a dad. It doesn't mean you got to come out with these.
I get him for free.
Blasphemous thing. But Vandy, man. Paulo CK, another week, another week. Except this time he doesn't have to do it with the ball. He does it just tackling.
Dude, he got like 20 tackles.
Oh yeah, my
22
gosh.
total tackles, 3 straight double-digit performances, and he played the full matchup in this one.
The guy's
you're
just
tacking
a
on
beast.
81 meters gained.
And I think he almost ran for 100 meters too.
Oh yeah.
How do you make 20 tackles and run for 100 meters?
Pretty crazy.
You're a beast. That's
how. And I will mention also that Henry Bell also making a impact here.
Yeah,
first game. In his very first game, only played 41 minutes, and he was able to cash in on that Utah set piece, adding the try there. Was a pretty key performer as well. So that's what you're exactly looking for at a hooker position. Was only able to rack up 9.2 fantasy points, but I think he stays on the
at
field
the front row position.
Yeah.
Not too bad. Not too bad. All right, let's shift on over now. Vandy, congratulations to your Utah Warriors. They're sitting actually at 2-1, which is pretty solid there moving forward.
Wish I could be there.
Now shifting over to what many thought was going to be the matchup of the week, and it definitely did not disappoint. The Houston SaberCats taking on the San Diego Legion, 31-26. The Houston SaberCats in a back and forth affair, getting away with that victory. And man, I told you this Houston SaberCats team. I told you this Houston SaberCats team was going to be good, and they looked good.
I gotta admit something. There was about 8 minutes left in the game.
Pretty sure you two picked the Legion last week.
Well, I probably did.
And your boy picked Houston.
Anyways.
And you guys
that is true.
For it.
Anyways. 8 minutes left in the game, Vandy. San Diego was winning. I turned it off. I turned it off. I turned the game off. I said, it's fine. We're good. I turned it off.
Dude,
and then next thing I do, I see Steven come up with let's go Houston. And then I'm like, what is he talking about? And then I went back and rewatched the last 10 minutes, and lo and behold.
Did you see the last 5 seconds?
Yeah, I saw.
Dude, when he threw it behind the guy and he dropped it. Oh, man, that was a heartbreaker.
Close.
Not for me, though.
Not for you, that's for sure. Let's get into some of these players that perform for Houston. Again, Gideon Van Vyk, man.
Unreal.
What a beast.
Unreal.
Coming off of what was one of the best performances from a fantasy perspective in round 2, 25 total fantasy points. He backs it up again, putting up 15.3, only 60 meters gain, about half of what he put up in that first week, but was able to add a try, 6 tackles, and a steal in there as well. He continues to perform for the Houston SaberCats. And then I will also mention Jerry Labuschagne.
A big interception.
Yo,
a big
honestly.
interception. And when you can have those big time plays, you're able to kind of rack up those points. So 103 meters gained, most of that being that because that interception, 16.5 fantasy points and a try there.
I don't think we give this team center group enough credit though. Christian Dyer, Dom McKenna, those two guys are tearing it up. Dom McKenna especially. I mean,
dude,
you know, that guy he's breaking tackles. He's like always breaking the gain line. It is ridiculous. That guy is just a huge part of this offense. And
last year he was getting subbed in. Like I had him last year. And he was only getting like 40 minutes a game. Now he started, played 80
now
minutes
he comes to
game.
Houston. Oh yeah.
Dude,
and unreal. He is just killing it. Absolutely killing it.
Yeah, Dom McKenna racking up 17.1 fantasy points in round 3, adding the try, has a try assist, 61 meters gain, and 10 tackles too. So just kind of an overall center performance there. And then I got to mention also Christian Dyer, who put up 15 fantasy points there, a try, 10 tackles, 60 meters.
He's playing so much better this year at outside center. Like,
man,
I had him last year. He looks so much better this year. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Something just to throw in before we move on to San Diego, Rye. Dylan Smith on the sideline said that he's expected to be back in a week or two. Carlo Denison, what does that mean? He just got hurt. Dylan Smith might come in, take that starting role back. By the way, MLR or Rugby Network, I don't know, whoever's doing the broadcast, they spelled his name DYLANSMITH on the sideline. Like, come on. Come on, the guy speaking South African. You spell his name like he's a surfer from California.
Yeah,
like,
get good. Come on.
But I will say that is a great point because when Dylan Smith did come in, dude, he was attacking, man, and he was getting some of those. He was opening up the gaps there, sniping there on the sides there. I believe one of the tries had led from one of his snipes and an inside pop on the inside. So that's exactly what you want to see from a fantasy S type scrum half. So hey, maybe he's a pickup that you're looking at in this round 4 waiver wire period. Yeah. And then let's shift over now to San Diego. I think the big one is talking about scrum halves. I mean, Richard Judd. He may have not put necessarily a huge fantasy performance, but I will say that he looked pretty decent. 11.5 fantasy points from the scrum half position, adding a try assist, only 26 meters gained and adding the try. He was attacking out there. He looked good.
He just sits on my bench just waiting to be thrown in. It's no big deal.
Yeah, well, now you're going to need him. Now
he's on the first 15.
Now that the guy who you have been riding here to take you to this 2-1 record, Nate Augsburger.
Oh, rest in peace. Rest in peace to his eligibility.
Best fantasy player in our Fantasy Ruckers League as of right now.
Absolute steal in the draft.
19.3 fantasy point round 1, 18.5 in round 2, backs it up now in round 3, 15.3 fantasy points, 82 minutes played, 82 meters
Keep
gained.
it coming.
Talk about he's got 4 tries in 3 games, adding 1 in that round 3 matchup against the Houston SaberCats here. Talk about a steal. And what's funny, Vandy, too, is that Matt wasn't even going to pick this guy. The only reason why he has Nate Augsburger is because you took Luke Campbell. That is the only reason why he has Nate Augsburger.
You took him from me, and now I got Augsburger. But to be fair, now it should be Richard Judd versus Luke Campbell because Nate Augsburger isn't a 9 anymore. He's retired from the scrum half position.
So what you're telling me is I could have Nate Augsburger is what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe in another life, buddy.
I wish I was in that life.
And then, some guys that I want to mention that kind of had a little bit of a quieter game. Josh Henderson, after having first 2 really good weeks here for the San Diego Legion, really a stinker there. 33 minutes played. I'm not sure if injury was
I don't know. He was taken off early, and Will Hooley came in and
only kind of 33 minutes, so not really the best thing that you want to see. Obviously, Carlo Denison's dealing with that injury stuff, and then guys that I've been high on for Houston SaberCats, Hanko Gurmiches, Nathan Denhope, kind of quiet days there as well. But again, there's that whole aspect of volatility as well coming in. So we'll see whether or not they can bounce back. All right, let's shift over now to the final matchup of round 3. The New York Ironworkers taking on the Old Glory DC. And this was a fun one in terms of being on the New York Ironworkers side, because from an Old Glory DC standpoint, there was nada here from a fantasy perspective. Not really anyone that you want to see. There were some guys that had some okay performances. I don't think anyone, I believe, on except for maybe Jamison Fa'anana Schultz, really reached double-digit fantasy scoring.
Oh, Tito.
All right, Tito too, yes, because he did have the lone try there for
that Bavaro pick, eh? Good thing I didn't bid more. I would have played him for sure.
Yeah, it was a tough one there, but basically the people that we want to talk about are all on the Ironworker side, and we got to start off by
Oh,
Jack Hayden.
how good was that celebration ride?
Yeah.
Yep.
How good. Hey, he
Yep.
scored the third try. They have a picture. MLR has a picture. They have one picture of him throwing the one, another picture throwing the two, and another picture throwing. Oh,
Well, Vandy asked for it last episode. He said, "I want a little bit more of that celebration
That's
stuff
right.
shown at the
That's
end."
right.
And Jack Hayden heard him, and now he got it. There you go.
that is true.
So,
This
yeah.
one had me worried.
You know
though.
what hurts there? I was thinking about drafting Jack Hyten. I took LaRue instead. He was the pick after.
Hey.
Tough. But I will say, though, there was a little bit of a shakeup here with the New York lineup, which may attribute to some of the fantasy performance that you're seeing from Jack Hayden. After starting at the fullback position for the first 2 rounds, he slots up to the fly half with Sam Windsor coming off the bench. There's speculation that maybe they just started Sam Windsor for the first couple of weeks to get him to that 500-point mark, but I don't buy it. I think they're just switching up the lineups here to see how that goes. You saw Andrew Coe move back to the fullback position, was able to get Tay Walden and Jason Emery in the center position. Get Fuatai in there at the back 3 as well with Ed Fidow. It's a pretty scary lineup there. But yeah, Jack Hayden was the biggest benefactor from that.
You know who was scared? Tito Diaz Bonilla. That guy was pooping his pants.
Yep.
I saw him. Okay, so every time off of set piece, they would run Ed Fidow screaming at Tito Diaz Bonilla. And I watched Tito Diaz Bonilla go like this and back up until he got hit by Fidow. Yeah, he got hit by Fidow trying to make a tackle. It was
I don't blame him.
I don't blame him. And it gave me flashbacks to trying to hit big guys because that's what I would do, except I would kind of move out of the way and pretend like I tried to make the tackle. At least he stood there. He made
fall
the tackle.
down, pretend like you tripped, right?
Oh, yeah. But, oh, yeah. But yeah, it was a scary sight to see.
And again, outside of Jack Hayden, there really wasn't any other big-time fantasy performers. Like Dylan Fawcett, obviously out of the try there from the set
Brendan
piece.
O'Connor.
I was just going to say that. Brendan O'Connor, Matt, I know you have him on your squad.
I do.
Again,
of course you do.
20 tackles in this matchup against the Old Glory DC. Not really performing from the meters gain standpoint, but it seems like this is a guy that's going to consistently be able to get you around that 8 to 12 point mark for you on a weekly basis.
That's what we got him for,
from the
right?
second row position.
That's what we expected. That's what we expected out of him. So, you know, he was exactly the guy that we looked for. The tackle machine.
Exactly as advertised.
Exactly as advertised. Exactly as drafted. Eh, Vandy?
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, let's shift on over to now to some waiver wire pickups. But yeah, it was a very exciting round 3, and again, just as exciting in our fantasy matchups as well. A lot of parity in the league. And Vandy, honestly, it's to your benefit too that this league is so split because at least no one is running away with it. At least you're kind of in the mix. You're only two wins behind, man. You'll be right back there.
It is true.
Shut up.
Positive silver lining.
Shut up.
All right.
Hey, and you're beating MLR. And you're beating MLR All Access, and you have like negative access. You know what I mean?
I don't even got Twitter.
That is true. All right, well, let's shift on over here to now some round 4 waiver wire pickups. Before we get into kind of some names and specifics here, guys, I want to ask you, and Vandy, you can kind of
how about we skip this segment and you guys just send me who I should pick up, and the rest.
We're about to tell you, Vandy. You never listen to me. I tell you every week who to pick up, and they've always turned out. Every guy has turned out.
Pickup look.
9.5 points in a loss.
It is very funny though that whatever
Bavaro actually looked good.
He did.
I thought he looked good.
I didn't bid enough, I guess.
What is kind of funny is that I feel to your point there, Vandy, about not bidding enough. Whatever guys that we seem to mention on this show just inflates the price every single week.
I put $12. I was like, it's got to be good.
Yeah, just keep in mind. Well, it's funny because after the Matthew spending spree,
I inflated everybody's price.
MLR stats came in and started dropping down some money too, so it was pretty funny.
I'm out of fab.
Before we get into specific names, I kind of just want to talk to you, and Vandy, you can kind of interject about this from I guess just a general fantasy perspective with your experience with fantasy football and other things like that. And Matt, for you, with the fantasy MLR sides and knowing rugby. Now that we are heading into the 4th round of things, where are your guys' mindset in terms of how you're approaching waivers? Is it still about trying to search for those guys that may become those starters? Or are you kind of stashing some flyer guys? And then from the mindset of also dropping guys, like where do you feel along those lines if you haven't seen them really perform here after 3 weeks of play?
Well, I guess I'm at the point now where I can afford to take some liberties because at this point, if I don't, not going to get any better.
Enough.
But
Fair
no,
enough. That's a good point.
I don't know. It's still tough to kind of know what I have and what I don't with kind of some of these names. But other than that, like I know, it's just like fantasy football. You keep a couple guys on your roster that you're willing to move in and out, and there's always a couple names you're not too worried about losing.
Sure. And then Matt, for you from a rugby perspective, I mean, when you're almost 4 weeks into a rugby season, what are you looking at here?
I mean, to me, like the way that I did it was the first week was to get all of those guys that could be league winners out of the way. You see their performance, you see their involvement on the team. Picked up a bunch of those guys, Fermin Martinez, Adrian Boyson, some of these top point scorers on their respective teams. And got that. And at this point, it's kind of just.
I can't take you seriously.
What?
How your team is performing now. Now you're just talking about.
I'm just feeling my team's
I know you're just.
No, my team's unreal now. But look. Now I gotta figure out.
He's the damn guru.
Now I remember that buys exist. I gotta figure that out this week.
And him in his stupid kimono, he just seems like he's the freaking fantasy. The fantasy friggin'.
I also dropped 60% of my fab in week 1, so I've got to kind of balance out.
I want
save
to
a little
reiterate
bit.
this league of schmucks we should start, and I'll cover that one, and we'll talk about your guys' league, and then my league of schmucks.
Yeah, all right. We'll see if we can put that in the works for you. Yeah, if this website keeps going the way it is, we may be able to have these expanded leagues. And hint for all of you guys listening, wanting to find your own league, we may be able to do that. Quite soon. But nonetheless, though, that is a good point. That is a very good point there, though, Matt, about kind of, where you're approaching that now and how you're viewing that from a rugby perspective. And at least now you're kind of taking.
That's a good point.
That's a great point.
Andy, how do you know league winner in week 1? I tried to pick out all the league winners.
I got him. I dropped 60% of my fab on him.
With this.
What are you talking about? I made 5 pickups in week 1 and 60% of my fab is gone. And what have I done since then? Win.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
More than me.
Well, one lost, but I also won.
Yeah, that's right.
You've been winning more than you've losing. I guess so we can put it
there. Technically the same amount, but yeah.
But I will say at least, Matt, now that after I guess you've been known as the guy that has had pretty good waiver wire advice last year, you just didn't take your own advice.
Yeah.
At least you've now shifted to now following.
Yeah,
it's true.
Throw out a bunch of smoke screen and then hit me up personally, eh?
I don't throw smoke screens, man. You know this. I'm for the people.
Well, let's get into some of these smoke screens here. Again, I think we have a little bit of I think, more robust waiver wire kind of pickup period here than we did in round 2. It felt like things were very, very kind of not deep there in round 2, and it was kind of shallow. But in round 3, there are some guys that are emerging. For me, I guess I'll put it out first is Caleb Strum. Caleb Strum back 3 for Chicago. I think it's only a matter of time before Chicago starts to kind of start figuring things out. They're probably not ever going to be as good as we thought they were going to be. But in round 1, 8.9 fantasy points for Caleb Strum. Round 3, 18 fantasy points there. Obviously, we just spoke about that in their matchup versus the Utah Warriors that they had, and obviously they had the buy-in there and too.
Yeah. But let's also be mindful of what happens with Billy Meeks, right? Like if Billy Meeks comes back in this lineup, like Rugby Morning said, let's say it's this week, let's say it's next. What happens to Caleb Strum? What happens? How does that center room move around? Because at this point you can't take Bryce Campbell or Mark O'Keefe off the field. Maybe one of them. I think Bryce Campbell has experience on the wing.
Yeah, and then a guy that I want to mention, and Matt, I'll let you kind of talk about him, is Nakai Penny. How much confidence are you putting in Nakai Penny? Obviously, didn't start in round 1, didn't start in round 2, but now finds himself in the starting role when they take on the Dallas Jackals. You can maybe argue that maybe it was a lineup switch because they were facing the Dallas Jackals and giving him an opportunity. So maybe the full confidence isn't there, but it's hard not to at least see what Nakai Penny was able to do in the time that he played in this round 3 matchup.
Yeah, I would drop like pretty low amount of fab on him, like 1% maybe of your fab on him, like maybe less, just because I wouldn't be comfortable picking him up until I know that he's starting this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And then going back to Caleb Strum, how much fab are you putting on Caleb Strum for this week from a percentage standpoint?
I'll probably go around 5%. Just because
what's 5% of $30?
Hey, I have no idea, but it's something. That's all the math I can do. But but
Oh god.
you like that one, Evan?
Yeah, you killed
But yeah, I just don't know how long he's going to be relevant for,
Yeah.
just especially with the uncertainty of how Billy Meeks affects the lineup. But I mean, with the way he's performing, he's also kind of hard to take out of that Chicago lineup. So yeah, I would say 5%. Throw it down on him. Some people might need a flyer back three for this week though.
And then outside of that, especially if you're looking for kind of replacements for guys that you may have on bye week or may not be starting, I think you really want to just look at guys who are, kind of shifting back to the strategy that was really the meta in our first inaugural season. It's just looking at guys that were on the field for extended periods of time and are staple parts of the offenses. So I'm looking at guys like Thomas Aoki. Thomas Aoki has played the complete 80-minute match for San Diego on a good, solid team every single week. He hasn't been able to find the try zone yet, but I feel like that's just a matter of time before back three is able to do that. He's started all three matchups again, like I said, and he's coming off his best performance of the year at 13.9 fantasy points, racking up 73 total meters gained. Another guy I'll throw in there, Will Leonard. He's a guy that has played 80 minutes in the past two matchups, and then also, a rough start to the season in that Toronto Arrows matchup. But again, I think he's just starting to grow there a little bit. But yeah, I think you're going through what is shown here and seeing what guys are really playing a significant amount of time and are playing portions or are playing big roles, I should say, in their respective teams, because you want to kind of jump on the curve. And you guys can tell me if you agree with this. You want to jump on these guys before they have that breakout performance. You want to jump on a Thomas Aoki before he finally scores the try, because when he scores the try and has a 15 to 20 point performance, that's when he's going to be hot on the waiver wire. He just hasn't hit there yet, so he's not as high of a commodity so far in the waiver wire period. So just keep an eye out for some of these guys that are on the field playing minutes and are being significant parts of their offenses.
Yeah, but be cautious with Will Leonard. I know he plays a lot, but just his involvement in it has really been taken out by Ruida Biddle. Ruida Biddle has really been the playmaker and the ball carrier on that team. So just be mindful with him. He was dropped for a reason. I think he was, Dankis Anchor is probably on the fence of how effective he would be moving forward. A couple guys just for me. If you need a 10, Kurt Coleman is there to pick up for sure. I would definitely look at Tuala Tassi or Fabian Goodall from the Toronto Arrows. Those guys are the shining light for that Arrows team and for that back line. And then just a kind of a flyer here, Paula Balakena on
Hold on, Benny's putting his bids in right now. He's looking at the computer and he's all right. What did you say? All right.
The thing is, I just realized I need a fly half for next week, and the only fly half is Kurt Coleman, and he's on bye too.
Oh,
yeah. Well, true. Dallas Jackals fly halves are very available for you, Andy. They're very available. I would go for one of them.
You know who I play next week, Matt?
Who?
You.
Oh, rough go, man. That's a tough one. I would just not even pick up a fly half. Don't waste a fab.
It's gonna be an interesting episode for this. But yeah, what you're saying, Matt?
I was just gonna say Paula Balakena. I think he's a pickup. He's down there in the lower end, but he had a good week on round 2. Look for him to have some more week. He was a big performer last year. He's gonna get on that trend. He just has to start getting going.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Vanny, took your notes. You ready for this waiver wire period?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's move on here.
Vanny. Will Hooley, look out for him too, man. He came in. He didn't look bad for San Diego. Could be a 10. You don't know what's happening with Josh Henderson. Will Hooley might be stepping in there.
There you
go. But
I
wouldn't make the fab pickup. Wait to see when the starting lineup comes out.
All right, let's shift over now to our round 4 fantasy preview. Give our predictions on who we think are winning these matchups, and obviously standout performers that we're looking out here. Opening up the weekend, New England Free Jacks taking on Old Glory DC at home. Should be a very interesting matchup. Obviously, New England coming off of the bye week. We'll see how that plays into effect. Old Glory DC looking to bounce back from a very, very tough matchup with the New York Ironworkers.
whatever.
Guys you're looking at, I honestly, I'm still pretty confident in pack players for this Old Glory DC team. You mentioned Lautaro Bavero. I think he's a guy that could be a performer here. Looking at that front row, Ramiro Herrera might be a guy that is able to do some stuff up there. But then also Free Jack sides. Obviously, these are guys that Patros is going to have those performances in there as well. And we'll see whether or not they're able to pick it up there. But what do you think here, Matt, in this matchup?
I'm gonna go with Old Glory DC.
All right, going to Old Glory DC. Any specific performers that you're looking at here in this matchup?
I'm gonna look at another big. I look at a big performance from Bavaro. All right, I'm gonna say Ramiro Herrera also scores a try this game.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on the Free Jack side, I'm gonna say just because I gotta have him do well. Jason Potros.
And I think the big X factor in on the New England Free Jacks side is going to be Mitch Wilson. I think Mitch Wilson has the potential to be explosive. Yeah, he looks absolutely fantastic. And if Old Glory DC kind of plays into his hands, he could really benefit from that. I mentioned Jason Potros. We'll see if John Poland can kind of bounce back from an off week in that round.
And let's see if LaRue Milan is back after the bye week. I hope not.
Yeah, that's true. That'd be.
I won't get my hopes up
as well. Vandy, who are you going here? Free Jacks or Old Glory DC?
You know what? Can't trust Old Glory yet. I'm going Free Jacks.
All right, I already made this pick on another podcast.
Surprise.
I got to go Old Glory DC here. All right, shifting over now to Chicago Hounds taking on the Toronto Arrows.
The battle of the worst.
Battle of the worst. Both teams 0-2. This one should be an interesting one. Obviously, Toronto dealing with the issues that they've had. Chicago obviously dealing with the issues they have. Should be an interesting matchup. I mean, I'm always going to look towards those Chicago centers. They seem to be a very, very consistent performer on a week-in-week basis. The Toronto Arrows, we'll see. I think I'm right now still in the mindset that I'm staying away from my Toronto Arrows players. Obviously, outside of the big guys, obviously Sam Malcolm is able to come back off injury and is starting off of a bye week. That's a guy that I'm starting in there. Ross Brody is a guy that I'm obviously starting in there. But again, if I don't have to play Toronto Arrows guys, I'm not necessarily looking to do that.
I'm going to say look for a little bit of a down week from Mark O'Keefe and Bryce Campbell. They're going to be tasked with playing defense against Tuolatasi and Fabian Goodall, probably the two biggest centers I've ever seen in my life. Just look for a little bit, maybe an offensive down week from them. They're going to be spending a lot of their time trying to tackle these big boys that are coming at them. But my pick, if the Arrows are not at home, you always go with the other team, going with the Hounds.
Who are you going with, Andy?
Hounds.
Yeah, I'm going Hounds as well here. I think they win pretty easily here. All right. I mean, this is an easy pick here. San Diego Legion,
Jackals,
Dallas
baby.
Jackals. Yeah, right. I'm gonna get it out of the way. I think we're all picking San Diego Legion here. I think from every single week,
Nate Osberg is gonna kill me this week.
Yeah, we've seen what the Seattle Seawolves have done
against
the Dallas Jackals.
We've
We've seen what the Houston Sabercats have done against the Dallas Jackals. And I can only expect that the San Diego Legion are going to do the exact same thing here. Yeah, I mentioned Nate Osberg is probably going to have a big game. It'll be interesting to see what happens at that fly half position. I think Matt has a good point. Will Hooley, Josh Henderson, kind of a playing of fly halves there. But whoever's starting there is going to be a big play. I think Mike Teo is going to have a big game. I think Richard Judd's going to be quite fine there as well.
I'm going to call this Blair Cowan huge game. He's going to come out, make so many tackles.
Blair Cowan.
I mean, two straight weeks that he's had 20 tackles.
He's going to kill it this game.
So, against the Dallas Jackals team should be pretty interesting. Again, is anyone disagreeing that they're not going Dallas Jackals?
Yeah, I think we're all going San Diego Legion.
Oh, wait, did that make sense?
I don't know, but we're all picking San Diego Legion.
We're all I think we're all going San Diego Legion here. All right, let's go to the next matchup here. I think this is the matchup
of the week.
Nice.
Was there an echo on that one?
Seattle Seawolves taking on the Houston Sabercats at home here. Both the only two undefeated teams left. Should be a very exciting matchup. I think it's going to be a solid one. From a fantasy standpoint, I'm not too sure. I know the Houston Sabercats can be explosive, but the Seattle Seawolves have a pretty formidable D. Houston looks pretty strong on that side too, so I don't know from a fantasy standpoint it's going to translate. But nonetheless, I'm not hesitating. You got the two best teams here. You're playing those players.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm going to look at a big game from Don McKenna and Christian Dyer again. Those guys are going to absolutely tear it up. I think it'll be interesting to see how they go against Dan Creel and Tavilo Petty.
I will say, I think look at David Coetzer to have another big time matchup here. I think he's going to have to be forced to kick a lot from the tee here, which is going to obviously rack up a lot of points. I think that will be a big one in this.
Also,
well.
big conversation: Chait or Alatimu. I personally go Chait, but
I think
we thought the other way around at the start of the year. So
it'll be very telling. I think this week will be very telling with regards to how Seattle is approaching this season with their lineups. If Chait is back in the lineup, I think we understand that AJ Alatimu coming in for a Dallas Jackals matchup that they were feeling pretty comfortable with, giving Chait the week off to rest. I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how the Seattle kind of comes out here, which should be what they feel is their best and most competitive lineup, because this is a very important matchup only 4 weeks into the season. Who are you going with here, Matt?
I'm going with the Seawolves.
All right.
No, I'm going with Houston.
I was gonna say I'm going Houston.
I'm going Houston because their back line is just electric. I think they're just going to be keeping it going.
Yeah, and Vandy's going Houston too. I'm going Houston as well.
Wow,
I'm
original.
Clean the
I'm
board.
on the record. I'm on the record with this pick. This pick as well. It's tough though because Seattle Seawolves, them at home is a scary thought. Especially with the Starfire Sports Complex, which can be absolutely electric. It really makes me scared to pick against them, but nonetheless, I do agree with you, Matt, that the Houston SaberCats are a pretty electric side there. And if there is a team to beat the Seattle Seawolves for the first time, it's going to be them.
Yep.
And then now, kind of a tune-up game here for the New York Ironworkers taking on NOLA Gold here in the final matchup of the weekend.
They have to have New York Ironworkers has had to have the easiest start to the season,
right? I think
outside of the first game, they have just been coasting.
Yeah, so they had Seattle in the first week, then they had Toronto, NOLA now in this week. Who did they have in between?
They had Old Glory DC.
They had Old Glory the week before. That's right. So but Old Glory DC was I mean, they just showed up on it and they shut them down. I mean, it's hard to explain with that stuff. But all right, with this one, I think you're playing all your New York Ironworkers in this one. I mean, Rugby Wrap Up has been absolutely coasting with his New York Ironworkers players, and obviously has done him a very good job. And I think that's going to continue into this week. NOLA Gold-wise, Matt, you're sticking with those guys that you mentioned before. You're sticking with guys like what's it called?
JP Duplessis, Jordan Jackson Hope. I mean, I would have a little less, Rugby New York's defense is quite good, especially in the centers. They're going to be able to potentially shut Jordan Jackson Hope and JP Duplessis down. Hard not to start at least JP Duplessis, at least on my side. But you might be putting more NOLA guys on the bench than you usually would this week.
Yeah. Absolutely. Guys on the cuff there, you definitely want to look at that. May give you a little bit of pause to pick up a guy like Jordan Trainer. You may not want to do that, but yeah, I think you throw Jackson Hope in there, JP Duplessis, Tom Florence even I'd throw in there. You're still rolling those guys out. Who we got here? I mean, I'm going New York Ironworkers.
Randy.
New York. Come on, bro.
Right, Matt, who you got?
Say it. Say it. New York Ironworkers.
New York. I can't go. NOLA's they just don't know how to convert opportunities.
I think there's too much star power on New York, honestly.
There is a lot of star power. It'll be interesting to see, and I'd be interested to see whether or not Tay Walden can get into the try zone here in this matchup too. Because if he can turn that around, he's always having big matchups. He's able to score there too. And remember, all of our league members on bye this week: Rugby Atlanta, Utah Warriors. Get them out of your lineup as you're starting to prepare for your waiver wire bids that we talked about just moments ago. Make sure you're kind of figuring out that strategy and who you're going to be picking up to replace any Warriors guys and Rugby Atlanta guys you may have. Andy, I know you have a lot of Utah Warriors guys, so you'll be to make those replacements as well. So make sure all of our league members have that in mind. All right, hey, great show, guys. Vandy, Matt the Guru.
Matt the
laying
Guru.
us down all of the waiver. It's just going to be very, very poetic if Vandy you can pull out a win here, and get your first win against.
Don't get your hopes up, buddy.
We'll see. Hey, anything is possible.
Do you know what, Ryan? Regardless, next week you'll be playing the sad music for one of us.
That is true. The sad music doesn't go away. Maybe we can make it as much of a staple as what the poop emoji was.
Buddy, why don't I just fade into the show and then you just play that? We'll work on that segment for me.
No, you'll fade out because it'll be like you're
getting kicked out of the league. Thanks, Matt. Hey, thanks, buddy.
I was going to say you're passing away, but hey, that one's a little bit better.
Yeah, that's what's worse.
All right. Well, hey, going to be a super exciting round 4. Again, league members, make sure you're looking at those lineups, getting those players in who are not on bye, making those adjustments for the guys that are. Keep an eye out on those starting lineups. Been an absolute fantastic ride so far, 3 weeks in. It's been completely different than our first inaugural season. It's been an absolute blast, man. I know you're sitting at 0-3, but you've definitely, I can feel, have been having more fun than what you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
With the fantasy points and all that. Again, you can check out all of the fantasy performers, all of the matchups, all the standings, all the stats on the fantasyruckers.com. Again, thank you to Alistair Kirsch-Poole, who manages that up greatly, and he's been fantastic so far with that. And then again, if you aren't already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Throw us a like down there if you like what you heard this episode. Hit that subscribe button if that's something that you want to see on a weekly basis. And hey, if you wanted to do even more, hit that bell too to notify you when you're going to be able to see Vandy and Matt's pretty faces here on a weekly basis. And then the Discord chat is also down below too, that you'll want to join. Our Fantasy Ruckers MLR community has been absolutely fantastic with all that great stuff. All right, anything left to be said, guys? Vandy, Matt?
Negative.
All right. Well, let's shift on here. Everyone have a fantastic round 4 of the Fantasy MLR season, and we'll be back next week.
Will you, Vandy?
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.